Hello, everyone. It looks like we've got people flowing into the webinar now. Let me start off and say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where everyone is in the world today. Um, Welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining us. We definitely have a special webinar for everyone today. This is special for a couple reasons. One is this is our glue seminar, so thank you for joining. But particularly, this is unique because it's timed to a funding opportunity. We have annual funding opportunities, and we're going to spend some time talking about what that looks like, give everyone the opportunity to be a winner and win the opportunity to take advantage of that funding this year, as well as helping people to better understand all the resources that we have in our center. So all the people that you see here on our panel, you're going to get a chance to meet them today. But at the end of this, we're also going to have a chance for everyone to hear from Mehdi Javanmard, who's one of the CEOs. He is the CEO of RizLab, and he's going to spend a bit of time talking about his experience working with us and his company and how it's helped to accelerate his technology. So those are the real things that we're going to do. Let me kick off the program, and we are going to give everyone the chance to meet leaders throughout our Atlanta Center for Microsystems Engineer team. I'll start off by introducing myself. I'm Greg Martin. I'm a physician faculty member here at Emory University in Atlanta, and I'm also the co-PI or co-director for our center. You're going to get a chance to meet everyone else and hear from everyone that you see on the screen. So we'll get a chance to go through all of that as we transition through the slides. So let me first hand it off to Dr. Wilbur Lamb, who's going to take us through the next couple of slides, and we'll get things going.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is Wilbur Lamb. I'm one of the co-principal investigators along with Greg and Eric of our center here. I'm also a pediatric hematologist oncologist and a biomedical engineer. And what we're showing here is these series of lectures are actually in memory of Oliver Brand, who is a close colleague and was a founding co-principal investigator of our center. Oliver was a pioneer in microsystems engineering and a visionary and also just an all-around very nice guy and mentor to many engineers and technology developers over the many years. What we've done is actually set up an endowment in his memory that is specifically for PhD students that are going into microsystems engineering. So what you see here are several different ways that you could donate to this endowment, which will then be passed on to students as grants for their own research. So there's a QR code you can scan, or there's a link that you could also copy and paste, and you could always email us if you want to take advantage of this opportunity. Next. So I'll talk a little bit about who we are. We're an NIH-funded center. We're part of the NIH Point of Care Research Technology Network, and our center is based here in Atlanta. So we are the Atlanta Center for Microsystems Point of Care Technologies, and ACME POCT for short, ACME for really short. And we're based at three institutions here in Atlanta: Emory University, Georgia Tech, and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And our overall goal is to assist and enable inventors from across the country who've developed point of care technologies, especially those that are microsystems based, for a range of applications that are beyond proof of concept, and to help them define their clinical needs, conduct clinical validation, refine their technology, all with the objective of really accelerating the translation of their technology and helping them address the barriers thereof. With that, I'll pass this on to our Chief Operations Officer, Julie Sullivan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So as Wilbur said, this is the overall structure of our ecosystem here and all that we do. Obviously, a lot of words on this slide, a lot of things to understand, but you can see how we're set up with our administrative technology, clinical, and dissemination course. And really, we want to spend a little bit of time talking about who this solicitation is for and who might be thinking about applying for this year's cycle. Next slide, please. So do you have a promising point of care medical diagnostic testing technology in need of further development? So really, those that involve microsystems from any and all disease or condition focus areas. So we like to say that our center is disease inclusive, meaning we are not focused on one particular area or one particular illness or disease. Additionally, we are interested in technologies that have optical, electronic, micro, electromechanical, or other types of sensors, biosensors, microfluidics, or even smartphone-based systems. So again, diagnostic tests that involve any of these fancy words you see on the screen. Next slide, please. Some of the criteria, and an applicant does not need to have all of these things, but these are the things that we are looking for. So again, microsensors, microfluidics, or lab-on-a-chip technologies for point of care, or it might be better stated, point of need use. So perhaps you're looking at a home use indication or something that's more point of care. Those are the types of technologies we are looking for helping to support. We're looking for those that are at least at point of concept or ideally above. There is a health tech innovation cycle at CIMIT.org where you can kind of see those levels of where projects might be rated. We are looking for those that have had some prior funding or investment of any amount, those that are seeking engineering, app development, regulatory, human factors, usability, clinical, or analytical validation support. And we'll describe those a little bit more during this call. Ideally, would have minimum a lab scale prototype and ready to send that to us for evaluation within the next 12 months. And of course, innovative, looking for novel technologies or novel applications of existing technologies. Next slide, please. Oh, are we able to move? There we go. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Craig Martin.
Thanks, Julie. So I hope everyone's getting a sense of what ACME is and the things that we do and offer. Here's some examples, but go back one slide still. Here's some examples of projects and teams that have come to work with us in the past. So you see, for instance, in the bottom left-hand corner, what you might see is sort of the very common, very familiar lateral flow assay or a point of care test that people might use either over the counter or in a POC kind of setting. But you see also other things, larger scale, top left corner, where you've got an FDA-approved device that sits in sort of a point of care environment, but also can sit in a conventional laboratory environment somewhere within a healthcare system. And across on the right-hand side, you see all kinds of things that fit within different testing patterns, including what we'll hear from Mehdi about RizLab and their application and use, but also in the bottom right-hand corner, things that can be worn and are wearable monitors and diagnostics in and of themselves. Next slide. So this year we have our call for proposals. We've been doing this for about 8 years now. And our point is really to accelerate the development of these kinds of technologies and providing the services to advance them, particularly through providing in-kind support, the kinds of resources that we have. So throughout this webinar today, you're going to get to hear from more people about the different kinds of services. I'll show you more of that on the next slide, but I want to pause here for a minute, get everyone a chance to scan that QR code to see the opportunity that's open right now. If you don't have a camera or a phone with you that you can scan, go to acmepoct.org and just at the top, click on ACME Initiatives, and you'll see this funding opportunity. It's also available through the POCT network, the Point of Care Technologies Research Network, POCTRN.org. If you go there, you'll also be able to find the application. The deadline for submission this year is June 6th at midnight. Please don't wait till midnight. There is information in there, and we want to be able to review stuff, answer questions, and facilitate the applications as you guys are working on them. So take a look at it now. You may even want to look at it right after this webinar and then contact us if you have questions. Next slide. Yeah, so what's at the bottom of the slide there? 12 months, sorry, I should have said that. The 12 months of in-kind support and expertise for all the resources that we have within our ACME ecosystem. Next slide. So what we'll do is we'll walk through several of our different areas of expertise. So we have different cores as they're designed, but for us and for what you may be thinking about is how do these apply to you? How are you going to engage or work with them? How might they help? So we'll go through our technology, our clinical, our regulatory, and our market and business, as well as a usability component of what we do. And I'm going to be the host to sort of moderate as we move through that. But next, I'm going to hand it off to, next slide, please. Dr. Eric Vogel, who is the Hightower Professor at Georgia Tech and the Director of the Institute for Matter and Systems. He's the Director for our Technology Core. So Eric, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Greg. We can go to the next slide. So overall, we provide consultation and assistance related to fabricating, manufacturing, and characterizing point-of-care microsystems technologies. And I'll talk a little bit about the capabilities that we have. Next slide. So we run a clean room here at Georgia Tech and can do all kinds of different microfluidic engineering, fabrication, design. We have a materials characterization facility that lets you do imaging and testing of the materials, 3D printing and 3D bioprinting capability. You'll also hear from Wilbur on mobile app development, and you'll hear a bit on usability and accessibility testing. Next slide. So the characteristics of the customers that we can best help are those early stage developers, typically in pre-design lock, that already have some kind of prototype in hand. And I think perhaps the most important thing to take away on the technology side is we can really those who have specific needs regarding materials analysis, device design, and process flow. What I mean by that is that this is a year-long project and project that you'll get funded for. And obviously, it's impossible for us to completely develop sort of a new microfluidic from stem to stern. But if you have a prototype and you're having a specific challenge, a specific thing that you would like to improve, that's really where we can come in and help. Next slide. There are a couple of different ways that you can interact with us. So first, we can just provide consultation. We have a staff of PhD level research engineers and scientists, and so we can consult with you on specific microfabrication or characterization challenges. You can also come here and work at our facilities. We have a process by which you can come in and use our clean room or use our materials characterization facility. And then finally, the staff can also do a certain amount of microfabrication or characterization for you. Again, for those kinds of activities, it's best if you have a very specific need that you're trying to work to solve. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this. You can go to our website, cleanroom.gatech.edu. We have almost 200 instruments for doing a range of microfabrication to make microfluidics and a wide variety of tools to do all kinds of micro and nanoscale fabrication. Next slide. We also have about 75 instruments in our materials characterization facility. Again, you can go to our website, mcf.gatech.edu. Electron microscopes, X-ray diffraction, all kinds of different proximal probes. If you're interested in materials composition, we can do SIMS or mass spec. So a wide range of potential materials characterization. Next slide. I'm just going to give one. I have two examples here. This is a company that has come in and used our facilities, Oxos Medical Incorporation. They're making a handheld radiographic reader that anyone could use anywhere. They came in and used our facility to both fabricate their X-ray scintillators, do materials characterization, as well as doing lithography and patterning and alignment. And this group is going on, and they're now working with, they did some prototyping here, and are now at the stage where they're working with commercial manufacturers to take their technology to the next level. This is just one other example. I think we'll just go ahead and move forward, and I believe up next is Wilbur.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, basically we have tons of toys, right, that we have here that we can offer at your all's disposal. So we have additional facilities at another one of our institutions that are also related to prototyping. At Emory, we have a brand new 3D printing and 3D bioprinting facility that's really ideal for developing patient models and even medical device rapid prototyping. We also have a micro machining and soft lithography infrastructure for microfluidic assays. And again, we can offer these rapid prototyping facilities as well. And also, we are extending into the digital space with extended reality as well as mobile app development that I'll talk about here as well. And that really leverages one of our core facilities, a team of people we have that's called the App Hatchery within our center. And what the App Hatchery is a digital health incubator with services to really help investigators and technology developers develop their digital platform for diagnostics. So we really see that have seen in the last few years that there's a need for a companion mobile app, companion digital tools for a lot of point of care technologies, especially those that are sensors based, because often there's a digital readout and ultimately that readout needs to be resulted on a screen, whether it's a mobile phone or laptop or tablet. So we are able to help on that front, anywhere from consultation ideation, helping define what the prototype even looks like, and then the software development itself, and then the launch, implementation, even the maintenance of the digital tool itself. We've done this with a few groups already, and we're excited to really see where this specific team and infrastructure and offering can really bring you all. So thank you. And I'll now pass it on to our clinical team that is led by Dr. Annette Esper.
Thanks, Wilbur. Next slide. So the overall goal of the clinical core is to basically provide the companies with consultation in order to help them either with clinical verification, validation, usability of the device, and regulatory strategy. So I'll get into those specifics. Next slide. So these are some of the services that we offer within the clinical core. And they're really sort of a variety of services depending on the stage, for each developer. So it can vary from, helping companies really determine a use case for a POC device, determining the clinical usability. So engaging multiple end users, such as the lab staff and patients, both pediatric and adult patients. Trying to focus in a little bit on the regulatory strategy, the regulatory landscape can be very complex. So we have a team that can help sort of navigate that landscape, providing laboratory test verification, either with the clinical samples obtained or contrived samples. And then finally, developing potential clinical protocols that can be used for clinical test validation in a pilot study. Next slide. So who's ideal for these services? And the great thing about our clinical core is we can really help developers at various stages. So those that are just starting out, early to mid stage developers that just need some more guidance as far as the optimal use case for the device and help with navigating the regulatory landscape. Or those that are farther along in the process that might need help with usability and more of the clinical validation and verification testing. Next slide. So there are a variety of opportunities to interact with the clinical core. And again, it really depends on the stage of development. And so I think, one of the really important things that we can spend a lot of time with for early stage developers is really taking a close look at what the appropriate use case would be, and even, pivoting depending on where we think the best use case is, and providing clinical expertise along multiple clinical domains and really engaging other healthcare providers to give the best guidance. And then again, being able to do hands-on usability assessment with potential devices. Our regulatory team is really great at, again, guiding the complex regulatory landscape and helping with understanding what's needed for regulatory submissions and preparing those documents. And finally, really providing support for those early or late stage that need to, if interested, design clinical pilot studies to test their devices. Next. So now I'd like to pass it on to Sarah Farmer, who's going to discuss the human factors services.
Thank you, Annette. So our goal is to help companies optimize and de-risk product designs, assess the viability of potential use cases and for potential end users, and provide teams with actionable recommendations for improvement. So we're really looking to help you design technologies in a way that eliminates design-induced errors, minimizes human errors, and allows users to easily recover from errors. Next slide, please. So we have various types of different methods that we employ. So to do so, we consider factors such as overall project timeline, the target use case and target end users, what stage of development the technology is currently in, and the novelty of the form factor and protocol. So kind of the most basic evaluation that we'll do is a concept review, and that is for technologies that are in the proof of concept stage. We'll look for high-level barriers to usability in the planned protocol and prototype, and then it would go all the way to a more in-depth usability and accessibility evaluation. And for those, we'll do additional things like measure the force required to manipulate any components to make sure, they're accessible to all kinds of users. We'll assess the contrast ratios for readability and additional things like that. For all of these types of evaluations, what we do is offer actionable feedback with recommendations for improvement. We also conduct various types of user research, so we can design and deploy surveys, conduct focus groups, run various different types of user studies in the intended environments of use. So that usually is not a human factors lab. For over-the-counter technologies, we have a database of participants who have agreed to participate in research in their homes. So this sometimes would look like using a technology over a period of time, like weeks or months, if that's sort of the intended use case, or maybe it's a one-time user study where we ask them to use a device a single time while we watch. But we also work closely with the larger clinical team for point of care healthcare settings. So like Annette mentioned, we're able to often work with patients in the clinics and hospitals. We observe, interview the healthcare workers, and we often do the same with clinical laboratory personnel. So next slide, please. We love working with the developers in all stages, and we can offer assistance in any stage. So for technologies in earlier stages, we provide actionable feedback that can be incorporated into the design. So we'll focus on eliminating design-induced error and help you anticipate human error for designs that minimize overall error. For technologies in the mid stages, we'll help you identify major barriers to usability that need to be addressed, and help refine the product design for ease of use. This may look like, internal evaluations by our human factors researchers. It could be user research like focus groups or surveys, or even full-on user studies. And then for late-stage technologies, we'll place an emphasis on details that can be rapidly modified. So that's going to be things like on-device labeling, handling, packaging, instructional materials. And so that's kind of an overview of how we can help you. So I think I'm handing it over to Stacy now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Such cool stuff that your group does with human factors, really interesting. I am a member of the Dissemination Core, and so I just wanted to first give an overview. So the Dissemination Core is really kind of like outside of the ACME in terms of conveying best practices and then sort of what happens after you are ready to hit the ground running and what you can do next in terms of funding and development. But one thing to keep in mind is about the clinical and user needs assessments. So that's something really important that we try to hold directly to our heart. We have a lot of cool devices and technologies that are available to plug in different places, but we always want to keep in mind sort of what we call the clinical pull. So what are the clinical needs? And so then the technologies could be defined or refined around. And so clinical and user needs assessment is something that we can do and working with you to really figure out if there is this clinical pull and a clinical application for your device. So it's just a really important concept to keep in mind as you start to think about what your device is going to do, developing and refining your device and taking it to the next level. So one of the questions we sometimes get asked is, when is it ever too early to communicate with your group if I'm not ready for funding? The answer is no. Like, we want you to reach out to us and let us know if you have questions. Beginning with the end in mind is something that we definitely subscribe to. And so we encourage you, if you have a question about the clinical pull rather than the technology push, please reach out to us. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Malika Halder, who has a PhD in neuroscience, and she works now in the entrepreneurial space, and she's going to tell you about marketing and business services through ACME.
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna go take a minute to actually highlight some of the market and business services we offer. So we work pretty closely with our awardees to review their business plans, not just to validate what's actually there, but to flag any sort of overestimations that may not align with the current market landscape. So often we're able to help teams identify better use cases, as Stacy mentioned, for their technology for better product market fit. You'll see an example of one of these reports on the slide on the right. Will also help awardees with competitive landscape analysis, especially when teams are exploring new applications for their tech. So if there's an opportunity to assess how a product fits within a new segment or who the top competitors in that segment are, we can absolutely support that. Another area where we often get involved is pricing strategy. So that can range from basic market benchmarking to deeper work on the reimbursement landscape. So, for example, looking at how a product could be positioned in the existing billing structure. We also support SBIR and STTR grant applications from the business perspectives too, just to make sure that the structure and strategy of the proposal actually tells a compelling commercial story. And finally, we can help connect our awardees to local and national funding sources through the network of partners we've built over the years. So with that, I'll hand it over to Erica Tyberski, who is our regulatory lead.
Hello. Regulatory and really quality services fall into the clinical core of ACME POCT. And as a few of the speakers have talked about before, there's a lot that's happening at the same time in the different stages. So I just wanted to emphasize that work in human factors, also business understanding, and starting to understand the regulatory pathway and quality with how you're going to maintain your product over time all can be happening and should be happening at the same time because you'll find that some elements affect each other. One example I had with one company very early on was they thought they were going to build something a certain way for a specific market and it made all the sense, but there was no regulatory path to actually get it that way. So they were able to make the tweaks before design lock. And any of the work that this core does is designed to help create the most streamlined path to getting you through the process, which can be many different players. So I just say that because even within regulatory by itself, there are several players. We try to assist in identification of regulatory strategies. We can also teach on quality systems management. If you've never heard what those terms are, I suggest work with us very early so that we can ingrain a few ideals into your approach to design and development because it is not fun when it's a surprise later. We work with about 3 or 4 regulatory consultants in the Atlanta area with over 60 years experience. We can assist in your communications with the US FDA. Sometimes those meetings can go by very fast, and you want to make sure at the very least you get a few things done. We've played timekeeper before, we've run the whole thing before. And a lot of these folks we've worked with in several capacities. On the bottom, I just break it up with a fun fact. The pandemic really enabled ACME POCT to have a leading role with the US FDA. We worked closely with them. Okay, we worked closely with them for creation of protocols and strategies for what were called EUAs, which are no longer really in play right now. And we also co-published with FDA for sampling in pediatric patients. So we've worked with them pretty closely. Next slide. Again, as I said, early stage is definitely preferred for me. But if you're already in later stage, we can do a quick audit, make sure you have everything in line. If you already have a regulatory team, we can work with them as much or as little as you want. So I have worked with companies that are actually relatively large and have whole departments in regulatory and quality, and we've been able to assist down to a lot of the academic entities that don't know what quality is before I work with them. So we welcome, just be transparent. Tell us what the issues are, what your questions are. No question is too dumb because a lot of the times the rationale behind them is sit in policy. So it's not necessarily in the same line of thinking as scientific method thinking. So we're happy to go through that. The waterfall diagram you see on the right is basically where we say there should be review and verification of validation in all of these phases. So when you're identifying what the device needs to do and user needs, you should think about regulatory. When you're creating your design inputs and your specs, you should think about regulatory. Same thing throughout the development process. And then as you're testing and design output And hopefully, once it gets through FDA, there's still quality to be done. So this is a great waterfall diagram that FDA uses, but in a very quick snapshot, basically, regulatory should be touching you at each of these steps. Next slide. I will not read all of these, but I went through a few of the things that we do, but we can help with pre-subs. We can help with the actual submissions. We can help with protocol control. We can help with protocol authoring. And we'll have a good example here in just a few minutes from one of our awardees on the process. Next slide. A few things that are pretty standard for us. We do kickoff meetings with all of our awarded projects to gauge where they are from regulatory and quality perspective. We essentially look at where we are in design. Is it locked? What's been informing the design to see if we can have any input, or if we see any red flags, we try and highlight them early. We can do regular meetings, so weekly or more often as needed, as supplies last. I know my leadership would say, but we offer this as a huge in-kind service where regulatory consultation can easily go over $500 an hour. I know for small companies that is not fun. I've been in there myself. So really take advantage of this in-kind service from ACME. Next slide. Okay, I will be dovetailing into our guest speaker today. Mehdi is an electrical and computer engineering professor from Rutgers, and RizLab is an entity that spun out in 2019 from Rutgers. They're a very impressive ACME awarded team that has been working closely with myself and one of my other regulatory consultants, Catherine Cambria. I think the whole group thought it would be very helpful for potential applicants to hear an experience in real time working with several of the ACME POCT resources. So I will hand it over to Mehdi, and Mehdi, please introduce yourself more if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Erica, for the introduction, and thank you to the ACME team for having me at this event and giving me the opportunity to share my experience with potential applicants. So just wanted to say a few words about what we're doing at RizLab, and then also the amazing collaboration we've had with ACME and how we've benefited. Just to start out with a full disclosure, I am going to be talking about our technology, which only uses a drop of blood, and I did go to school at Stanford. So what could go wrong, right?
Oh, Mehdi.
Sorry, had to get that out
Well,
of.
but Mehdi, you didn't drop out, so that's a key difference, right?
Yes.
Exactly. No, but yeah, thank you again. By the way, I also have Georgia Tech and Atlanta roots. Did my undergrad there. But as Erica mentioned, RizLab is a spinoff out of Rutgers University, my lab, where we're essentially focused on developing micro and nanotechnologies applied towards health monitoring. But today, what I want to talk about is the technology that RizLab is the product we're developing and seeking to get FDA clearance and hopefully do a submission by the end of the year. We are trying to develop a tool that can help emergency rooms staff rapidly triage patients with severe infection and sepsis. So next slide, please. So similar to continuous glucose, how continuous glucose monitoring made glucose into a vital sign, we have developed the cytotracker with the aim of making white blood cells as a vital sign. Seems like the PowerPoint, for some reason, there's a little bit of a mismatch, but that's okay. So yeah, we like to think of this as two generations of product. The first generation product, we call it the cytotracker glucometer. Rhymes with glucometer, that's intentional. Our device, to the best of our knowledge, is going to be the first handheld analyzer like a glucometer that measures the total white blood cell count, the neutrophil and the lymphocyte count using only a drop of blood within 6 minutes. So the Gen 1 product will unlock Gen 2, which is essentially a software upgrade. It's an AI cloud-based software which can tell if a user's if a infection is more likely viral or bacterial. Next slide, please. So we are targeting two of the biggest public health problems that society is facing, namely sepsis and AMR. For those of you who may not know, sepsis is when an infection spirals out of control and turns the body against itself. Deadly condition. 1 in 3 hospital deaths are caused by sepsis. But if treated early, it doesn't need to be a death sentence. So time is of the essence. Antimicrobial resistance is another silent killer, primarily caused by the overprescription of antibiotics, the key driver behind that being the difficulty to discriminate between viral and bacterial infections. And so with the Gen 1 leukometer, our goal is to cut sepsis deaths by alerting clinical teams during triage in the emergency room. And with the Gen 2 CytoTracker BV, by rapidly discriminating between viral and bacterial infections, we will be cutting unnecessary antibiotic prescriptions. Next slide, please. So the SIRS criteria, which includes temperature, I think we skipped one. Yes. Yeah, so the SIRS criteria, which includes temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, and the white blood cell count, is the front line currently for sepsis detection. But there's a critical gap. The first three, previous slide. The first three are vital signs that are flagged and obtained in ER triage. Whereas the white blood cell count, that's trapped in the hospital lab, which often causes dangerous delays. And often the white blood cell count can be a tiebreaker to decide who gets immediate treatment. And so with the CytoTracker leukometer, the goal is to change everything, turning the white blood cell count into a true vital sign, essentially enabling sepsis alert at ER triage. Next slide, please. Yes, so here's the standard workflow for patients. As you can see, depending on the hospital system, some places it's fast, but often it can be slow and efficient, multiple steps required to get the white blood cell count. And then next slide, please. Here you can see the streamlined workflow enabled by the CytoTracker. Our goal is to be able to make it possible to obtain that data point within triage, similar to the other vital signs, so that within 15 minutes, the clinical team will know whether this patient is at high risk for sepsis or severe infection. Next slide, please. So this is the engine behind the CytoTracker leukometer's accuracy. So we use microsystems, so essentially a microfluidic electronic cartridge with microfabricated electrode, actually produced by display manufacturing technologies, backed by 2 issued patents, 1 pending, and also peer-reviewed clinical data. Next slide, please. And here's the evidence. In a multi-site peer-reviewed study, the CytoTracker went head-to-head against a benchtop gold standard analyzer costing more than 15K, delivering a correlation of 0.99, demonstrating that we can get lab quality accuracy in the palm of a hand. Next slides, please. And also, we want to emphasize that in addition to ER triage, we have these additional use cases in secondary markets that our device has potential for addressing as well. Next slide. And as for the Gen 2, we have performed multi-site clinical trials on over 500 patients, already showing more than 90% accuracy in accurately discriminating between viral and bacterial infections. Next slide, please. So yeah, I guess that was a summary of what we're up to at RizLab. Just wanted to say a few points about how we have immensely benefited from our collaboration with ACME in the last, I guess, more than a year. I guess the way that I like to think about it is because it's an in-kind service, it really helps me as the CEO, because what I care about is reaching critical inflection points for raising capital with minimal funding, right? My CFO, whose job is to make sure that the Excel spreadsheet's number is above zero, he indirectly benefits from it, right? And so I think Erica pointed out very nicely that when working with regulatory consultants, you're talking about several $100s an hour, and it can get really expensive if you want to do a deep dive and get into really in-depth conversations, which quite frankly you need when you want to design clinical studies. You want to go into making sure your quality management system is up to date, all the documents, everything is compliant and in place. Doing pre-subs with the FDA, the bills for this can stack up really rapidly. And so we have benefited so much in the last year in working with Erica and Kathy. They are very, very savvy and gotten numerous devices through the FDA. They know they talk the talk and they can walk the walk as well. So we have benefited so much from that, and I can tell you saved so much funding. I would say that the benefits for us even got it. I would say it accelerated as we got closer to design freeze and even completed our design freeze with the need for going into real detail for all of our analytical and clinical study protocols, and just step by step reviewing the data that we're getting from these studies. We've also have started collaborating with Dr. Esper on the clinical side, and very much looking forward to kicking off our clinical study. And also with Home Lab, we have really benefited quite a bit, performed usability testing, and got very important feedback on our device interface. And by the way, a great thing to document, and a great thing to show to investors, right? Showing that we've got real practical feedback regarding our device. I think key opinion leader feedback from Dr. Greg Martin and his team on use cases of our device and where it could play an important role, and also looking forward to doing a pilot study with the team. And as I was listening to the various presentations, got more ideas that I may want to bug you guys about. But yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Terrific. Thanks, Mehdi. So this is really a great example of seeing all the resources and then sort of pulling all these together. So Mehdi's a great example of a company or a team that came to us with specific needs, and a lot of those aligned really well. So you heard him talk about use case evaluation, how maybe that's going to be optimized or where that's going to fit best, both from a market and business perspective and a clinical use. Obviously, a lot of work with our regulatory team, finding the best pathway and how this device can move forward, linking that to clinical testing, validation strategies, and others, and then obviously looking at our usability and engineering core services as well. So let's open it up. I know we have several questions that have come up in the chat already. I just want to say it out loud. For those of you that are online here in the webinar, there is a Q&A function, so please put your questions in there. We'll try and answer them either live or we can type out and write answers to you. You probably also noticed that there's a lot of information on our website. So you probably saw a couple of links there float through, both about the call, but also about the resources that we have to offer. So let me pull up a couple of the questions here and field these. So there's a couple of questions about the number of teams and number of projects that we support each year. So Julie, I saw that you answered that, but why don't you talk about that just for a minute as well for everyone to hear about how that works in our annual call and what we support.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. So obviously we don't have infinite resources at our center. So this is a competitive application process. Typically on an annual basis, we select anywhere from 3 to 6 projects for support. One of the things we do ask in the application process, which again, you'll need to register for the site called CoLab. The link has been put in the chat a couple different times. That is the system, the only way in which we can accept your application. So we don't accept things via email. It has to be done through this system. Word counts and types of files we can accept are all listed in there. But we also do ask you to clearly state to us, based upon the information you've heard about our center and the services that we offer, which of these in-kind services are most needed by your project. Meaning, we can't offer you all of regulatory, all of our engineering core, all of home lab, all of clinical, and all of analytical evaluation. So we want for you to tell us, based upon the development of your project, which of those you're most in need of at this point in time. Happy to answer any other questions about that.
Thanks, Julie. And it relates to a couple of the questions in the chat or in the Q&A function. So one is about the opportunities for different services and how those might work. So this is a 12-month award. The question is also about, are there things that can be brought to bear or can help after that period? Mehdi mentioned, for instance, that he's been working with our clinical team to look at developing additional studies. We have a large environment, in which case we may be able to help people to connect to people who could take things to the next stage, as well as the business market, the other elements that would be put together. So I think we have a lot of other resources. That's not necessarily part of what would be the funded project, but certainly we are here to help you accelerate and advance your technology. Let me hand this to Wilbur for a second. There's 2 questions that have come up as well about prior funding and the level of maturity in the technologies that are coming to us and whether certain levels of funding are either desirable or challenging. So Wilbur, let me have you talk about that for a moment. I saw you answered a couple of them in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of technologies we're looking for, I would say ideally there's a working prototype. You're moving towards your minimal viable product, your MVP. That's often the sweet spot in which our center can help the most. There's certainly no requirement on the technology developers, or if you're a startup, of having any set of funding, whether it's government funded or from the private sector, from investors, or any of that type of aspect. Key is to come into us if you have a microsystems-based point of care technology, and we try and really link our services to maximize our help we can give you all. That's really kind of the fundamental guiding principle that we're operating from.
Yeah, and I mentioned it, you probably saw it if you looked online, but the projects that we select get 12 months of support. That's really dedicated to try and align to the best we can the kinds of services and support that you just heard about that we can provide. Usually that's valued between $50,000 and $250,000 of support. That's going to vary depending on what people need, as you just heard. But we also have the ability to make, particularly in some rare exceptions, direct monetary awards of smaller amounts that we can help when there's a justification to really help a technology accelerate or advance that wouldn't be able to be done without that. There's also a question in the chat about market research support. I see Malika answered that a little bit, but maybe Malika or David, if you want to talk about that a little bit more, if you want.
Well, yes, we're happy to support some of the marketing aspects. And sometimes if you're interested in a market analysis, then I can pull in some of the business students from Georgia Tech that are very interested in these technologies to try and help round that out to look at a different perspective from the business angle of market support and how to penetrate into the market. Malika, you want to say any more?
Yeah, anything to add to that?
No, I think you definitely covered it. Another thing we do try to do is think of it from a venture landscape perspective. So if you are looking for venture funding eventually, there are a lot of things in the business case that they want to see. So we like, for example, exit strategy. Have you thought about customers? That kind of thing. So we'll lay that out for you if that's something that you're looking for eventually.
Good points, definitely. So there's another question that I might actually pivot and hand back to Mehdi. So there's a question about cytotracker, white blood cell analysis, and whether that's designed for individual users, medical professionals, or for other purposes. And what key challenges did you face in both the technology development and business model implementation?
Thank you for the question. Really, really good one. So initially, we're targeting in clinic use, point of care, but we do have an eye towards going home use ultimately, but initially it's a lower hanging fruit, and there seems to be a good need for it. So we're going in clinic initially. I think the second question was what challenges both in the development and on the market side. Very, very good question. Lots of challenges. I can talk. I also, I'm a professor, so I can talk for a few hours about this. But putting on my entrepreneurial hat, I'll try to summarize it quickly. I would say a big challenge was on the manufacturing side. I think with microtechnologies, using lab-based sort of nanofab-based technologies, having like a superstar PhD student or postdoc fabricating the initial batch of devices, doing the proof of concept, you get good results, and one thinks that, oh, okay, it's only going to get better as I go to like a contract manufacturer outside, but oftentimes one finds that, oh wait, it's actually the opposite, because the contract manufacturers don't necessarily put in the same care and interest as does that star PhD student or postdoc. So doing that transition was a challenge, which thankfully we were able to overcome. On the commercial side, as I mentioned, our device, for the feedback we got, sounds like there's a lot of different indications in infectious disease, oncology, psychiatry, where there could be a fit. And one challenge we had was how to identify that product market fit and the beachhead market. We kept getting feedback from investors that, okay, this is too early. You haven't figured out your product market fit. And it took us a lot of time to really, do market discovery and really uncover, the use case that we, talked about. Being able to really, it's not enough to focus and just have one product, right? But really focus on what's that first indication that you want to go after. So yeah, I'll stop there, but I think those are, two big examples of challenges.
Thanks, Mehdi. There's two other that I'll talk about and bring up, get people's input on. So one question is about whether the application is limited to American-based companies. Right now, according to the NIH rules, that is the case. So Julie put that in the chat. You can see the notice on that just came out recently. We don't know if that's a final ruling, but for right now, that is the ruling that we have to abide by in terms of sort of where the funding can go and who's competitive for this open opportunity this year. The other question I see in the chat is about intellectual property, and Erica talked about that a little bit, but I want to open this up to the rest of the panel, whether how do we deal with IP related matters, everything from, working with technologies and development and accelerating those to are there ways that we can help with the intellectual property management. So Erica, you're welcome obviously to unmute and answer some of that as you presented today as a regulatory expert, but you're also a CEO of a company and have your own intellectual property. So knowing the ecosystem we work in, you're welcome to chat. And then Wilbur, Eric, others obviously as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to unpack that question. So I could see you asking it on, can we help with IP strategies? And many of us have dealt with IP and seen realization of value happen with different case studies. So we can certainly share that as part of our expertise. But I think the question might also be quite literal. Can any of the funding be used for IP protection? Just like with regulatory, IP fees exist and they can be thousands of dollars for small entities. So I think that's one question I'll kick back to the PIs. And then anything else we've learned about IP along the way.
Yeah, I think Erica, you said it well. I would just maybe add on succinctly that yes, in theory we could help. It really depends on what the specific IP question is. But in general, we do have lots of resources that can help advise and lots of people that have some experience in IP related issues. Just really depends on the question, but we think we can help.
All right. I'll remind everyone, we've just got a few minutes left. If you have something you want to put in, a question in the Q&A function. Another question that came in that's answered online for everyone to hear, the timeline for the application. So this is the application deadline is June 6th. We expect the official program to start later in the year. Normally this would start in the fall. What we see in here is that NOAs would be expected to go out in November 2025. We always try and be flexible about that. As you heard from Mehdi, we've worked with him sort of through that period. And not only would we try and work with people during the application period if you have questions, but certainly if you're selected, if you come to work with us, you have that 12 months of support. And if things get delayed in some way, we always try and be flexible and make sure we're providing the full support that we can throughout the project period. Any other comments or questions from the panelists? I know we've answered several questions, but anyone want to add anything that we haven't talked about already?
I'll just add, I see a question from Ruben. Sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Based on previous experience, did the ACME POCT engagement help in future fundraising? Correlation, causation, not really sure sometimes. I think we would like to say that for some of the companies that have come through, this is our 8th year of offering these awards. We'd like to think that our help has certainly assisted companies in future fundraising. Can we directly say that it's because of us? I'm not sure that we can, but we would like to think that. I don't know, PIs, would you like to add anything to that one?
And I would just maybe as a simple answer, go back to the examples that we gave of prior companies we worked with. And there's a variety of different technologies in there, but some of those are FDA approved on the market and now being utilized or marketed. And there's obviously earlier stage companies or technologies that have been evolved, changed, improved in terms of design and function and are moving forward as well. So Mehdi, I think that's also maybe asking you whether you felt like it added value, particularly in future funding where you are now, and did it open new opportunities or help you with that element of being a startup company? But certainly others, Wilbur, Eric, and the rest of the panel, if you have comments about this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think those are really critical inflection points, especially when you're like a medical device startup company. Seeing that you're in good hands on the regulatory side, you're doing pre-submissions with the FDA, getting feedback. Those are things people care about. The usability studies are also things that people have cared about. The connections with the key opinion leaders. Yeah, all super important.
And to be clear, human factors studies are often done alongside usability and clinical studies to support your FDA submissions. These are typically the things that cost the most. So a human factors study could, if done for a class 2 clearance or a class 2 submission, could cost $100,000 easily. So getting some of those evaluations done, even to preempt, to prepare you for your full human factors is quite valuable, just dollar for dollar. So keep that in mind. I answered one question in here, but I do want to make sure it's very clear. Like, you do not have to be a faculty person to apply for this opportunity. You can be someone who just spun out. You can be the PhD student, right? I think all are eligible.
Yep. So you could be a person of any background. You could be a small company, a startup, a spin out. And as Stacy also answered, you do not have to have any affiliation. This is a nationwide, at least this year, nationwide throughout the US call for proposals. There is no need to be connected to our teams at Emory, Georgia Tech, or Children's. So this is something that we look to support people all over the country as we have in the past. I think we are just at the top of the hour, which brings us to the end of our program. So I definitely want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you all. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Look to our acmepoct.org website for more details. And if you have questions, feel free to use that as the link to get us connected and ask questions. Thank you all for participating. I look forward to seeing applications and learning from everyone.